September 2008, in my opinion, began the period of time known as the too big to fail era in the United States of America. It may seem like ancient history to some, but we better focus on that period of time so we can understand the next major financial disaster that's coming to this country. Let's look at what resulted from the collapse, the market collapse, the economic collapse of 2008. We've seen too big to fail institutions become even larger and more powerful and more systemic and more entrenched in government in writing policy that benefits them. We've seen a nation of 320 million people end up with a welfare roll that is over 47 million. 45 million people on food stamp. 56% of the population is considered to be below average FICO score. We have $17.5 trillion in sovereign debt. All of this, in large part, is due to the financial collapse of 2008. So it's very critical that we understand what is coming next. You see, it isn't as the establishment business media in Washington, D.C. and Wall Street want you to believe, which is 2008 was inevitable. Nobody saw it coming. We couldn't have prevented it. We did everything we could. That is not true. There was a lot of people that knew what was coming. There was a lot of people that saw the risky gambling going on and could see the indicators and saw that we were heading for disaster in late 2008, and most certainly we did. But if we look at some of the key indicators right now, we see that we're heading for even a larger disaster. You see, because when it happens in 2014 or 2015, it isn't going to be a nation that's sitting there with $7 or $8 trillion in sovereign debt. No, we're going to be a nation that is at $20 trillion in sovereign debt. We're not going to be sitting here with 15, 20 million people on food stamps. It's going to be more in the neighborhood of 60 million people on food stamps. Not half the nation on below the poverty line, but 2/3 of the nation below the poverty line. The too big to fail institutions, when the next financial disaster occurs, they're not going to be systemic. They are going to be the government. They will be responsible for every piece of legislation that is written. So it is key that we look at some of the indicators to see how far off this collapse is from occurring. A few indicators such as the margin debt versus the growth of the S&P 500. If we look out throughout time and history, we see that every single time margin debt on Wall Street outpaces the growth of the S&P 500, we go into a recession that is much more violent than the one prior. Now, the all-time high of margin debt to S&P 500 growth ratio was set in 2007, right before the collapse of 2008. The all-time high in 2007, that is, until the first quarter of 2014. Margin debt today is now at a new all-time high. This will precede the next financial collapse. How about our GDP growth? You have an in-bed mainstream establishment business media that toes the party line, that pushes the propaganda forward, that we are in the midst of recovery, that stealing from your financial future has somehow saved this consumer-based economy. You have Washington, D.C. that loves to cook the books and put out rosier than reality numbers, and Wall Street that wants to push the same garbage over and over again, that the more debt we go into, the better our economy is going to get. Now, all of these people together, all of these thinkers together, had come up with a projection of 3% growth in our GDP in the first quarter of 2014. What was the real number, even with the government number they're putting out? 0.1% growth, a sure indicator that recession is right around the corner. But here's something that should hit home to everybody, because it is the housing sector, one of the strongest pillars of our economy. What did the first quarter bring in the housing sector? This sector that was absolutely eviscerated in 2008, trillions and trillions of dollars of wealth lost, millions and millions of people's homes foreclosed on. What did this new vibrant housing sector bring in the first quarter of this year? How about with Citigroup, a 71% decrease in first-time home mortgage originations? JP Morgan right behind them with the 68% decrease in first-time home mortgage origination. This is just 3 of the 15 signs of impending financial disaster that's going to be far greater than anything we saw in 2008 that we're going to cover with financial expert Gabe Elton on this week's On Point with me, Charlie McGrath, only on the Boiling Frog Post. Please, this free preview is brought to you by the subscribers of Boiling Frog Post. If you want to support truly commercial-free, independent media, subscribe to the Boiling Frog Post and see this week's edition of On Point.